Welcome to the White Witch podcast with me, Carly. Hope you are all well, witches. On this week's episode, we will be talking all about the Goddess NicNeven, and our book review today is Cunning Women, written by Elizabeth Lee. Firstly, I must say I was sent this book by the publishers. I just want to say I am 1000% happy to recommend this book. I do get a few books sent to me. I only review them if I feel that they are worth buying, but I was utterly spellbound by this book by the get-go. So I will read you the blurb as it's good. 1620 Lancashire. Away from the village lies a small hamlet, abandoned since the plague, where only one family dwells amongst its ruins. Young Sarah Hayworth, her mother, brother, and little sister Annie are a family of outcasts by day and the recipients of visitors by night. They are cunning folk. The villagers will always rely upon them, quick with a healing balm or more. Should the need arise, they can keep secrets too, because no one would believe them anyway. When Sarah spies a young man taming a wild horse, she risks being caught to watch him calm the animal. And when Daniel sees Sarah, he does not just see a strange, dirty thing. He sees her for who she really is, a strong creature about to come into her own. But can something as fragile as love blossom between these two in such a place as this? And when a new magistrate arrives to investigate the strange ends that keep befalling the villagers, he has his eye on one family alone and a torch in his hand. You might recall I have a few other witchy fictional faves that we have reviewed on the podcast, such as The Witch of Salt and Storm, The Witch's Daughter, and The Familiars. I love all of these, and I love this book. The one thing I think stood this book out is I feel it's a lot more gritty. I can't go into too much without giving too much away, but a lot deeper, darker issues come up within this book. The lead character, Sarah, is very strong. It's a case of a woman who tries her utmost for her family to make things right, trying to change her circumstances and fate as best she can. She pretty much takes on the mum role as her mum is pretty battered by life, but over the course of time, we see Sarah take on more than her fair share until she starts to get angry and seek out her own revenge at certain characters within the book. I felt this was interesting to see, as in most other books, the main witch is usually a bit of a goody two-shoes, but there are a few occasions in the book where you're a little bit shocked and not sure if you should still like her or not. But to be fair, she has a lot going against her, and I think we no doubt would have done the same. The ending is a complete plot twist and not what I was expecting. I actually found myself shouting out loud in shock, realising my neighbours could probably hear me as the window was open and think I'm a complete nutter. So I will read you the opening lines of the book, as I was gripped with this from the beginning, and I had a few books I had read or started recently that didn't make it to the show as they weren't for me. So the minute I started this, I just got those feelings. Lancashire 1620. Annie sleeps, curled up on the bed we share, wet thumb fallen from her mouth. I kneel, calling and shaking her. She frowns and mutters. Wake up, I say. She pushes me off and turns her back. Get up, time to search. Her eyes open and she sits forward, clutching my arm. Has he come? We rang the bell, didn't we? And the ash is untouched. She looks to see that the thin ring around the bed shows no trace of his hoof print. I'm safe then, she says, lying back down. I love the herbalist element to the mum within this book. There are little scattered bits you can pick up in regards to how herbs were used. I love, love, love the little sister. She's gorgeous, so sweet, especially when she talks all about finding moonfish and whispering shells. So I cannot recommend this enough. Not to mention, it's an absolutely stunning hardback book, like really oldie worldy feels. The artwork is gorgeous. It is one I will put pride of place on my bookshelf and on my socials. It's stunning. Cannot recommend this book enough. Join me after the break to talk all about NicNeven. Welcome back. So let's get cozy. It's June. It's still raining. I've just poured myself a nice cup of tea out of a teapot actually this week. Why is it when you pour tea out of a teapot, like you still get most of the tea on the table? Like who invented teapots? Grumbles about tea. But yeah, it's just really frustrating. Anyway, without further ado, so NicNeven particularly sparks my interest when I read the book Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horne. This is one of the early book reviews that I did on the podcast. In his book, Roger J. Horne delved into a lot regarding Scottish folk magic and references NicNeven often. I particularly loved his conjuration of NicNeven, which is as follows. This incantation sometimes entails dancing or walking in a circle around a fire in order to conjure the Scottish witch queen. It is sometimes referred to as the witch's reel. The word comma is a term to describe a companion or friend, usually female. Comma go ye before, comma go ye. If ye will not go before, comma let me. Ring a widdershins, a whirling skirling widdershins, comma, Carlin, crone and queen, 3 times 3. So NicNeven came up again on my radar recently when I read an article that explored how she was seen as the Hekate or grandmother witch of the Scottish peasantry and a mysterious divinity. NicNeven is also linked to the Germanic goddess Holda, Hel, queen of the underworld, who leads the wild hunt in Norse legend, and the Romans identified her with Diana. But I have also seen links between NicNeven and the Cailleach due to both goddesses being tied to the beginning of winter and celebrations at Samhain. It was believed that paying NicNeven honour would mean a mild winter. NicNeven was associated with the seasons and harvest cycles of the earth and was said to hold power over land and sea, being able to transform into the landscape around her, same as the Cailleach is able to. Other theories claim her name is NicNeven or daughter of the Nihin, which connects her or is said to connect her to the Irish war goddess Neven. You might choose to work with NicNeven if you hold particular connection to the land and sea, but she is said to be great to work with for glamour, like glamour spells, casting charms, divining the future, otherworldly travel, communicating with spirits, protection at night. But as she is seen in a sense as like queen of the witches, same as Hekate, pretty much anything within the domain of witchcraft. NicNeven is said to be connected to the realm of the dead and necromancy akin to Hekate. She was said to hold shape-shifting powers and was seen as a giantess or an ogress, crone, but also a beautiful young woman. She is said to be a goddess who moves between worlds. She has also been referred to as the Bone Mother, although I couldn't find much on that. I think it is to do with the necromancy and her connection to the realm of the dead. So NicNeven, her name is from a Scottish Gaelic surname of Neach Neohain, meaning daughters of the divine. It is also said her name is derived from Gaelic NicNeven, meaning daughter of frenzy, which isn't to do with the word frenzy as we know it, so, kind of chaos, but heaven, which links to the other name she holds, NicNome, which roughly translates to daughter of the saint. It's debated on which saint she is said to be the daughter of, but some say Bridget could be the main possibility. NicNeven is the crone goddess of Samhain. She has themes of protection, ghosts, divination, peace, and winter. So her symbols are pumpkins, gourds, most objects of symbolism linked to Halloween or Samhain. At Samhain, pumpkins and gourds would be carved for protection and used to illuminate the path for a spirit's transition. NicNeven is said to present herself as a beautiful woman or alternatively an old hag. R.H. Cromek described her in 1810 as a celebrated personage who is called the Jaya Carlin. I'm a little bit unsure on the pronunciation. I've looked this up and seen it said a few different ways. So she is called the Jaya Carlin, reckoned the mother of glamour and near akin to Satan himself. She is believed to preside over the Hallowmas raids, and mothers frequently frighten their children by threatening to give them to NicNeven or the Jaya Carlin. She is described wearing a long grey mantle and carrying a wand, which, like the miraculous rod of Moses, could convert water into rocks and sea into solid land. Sir Walter Scott mentioned NicNeven in his novel The Abbot, where he has a character called Old Mother NicNeven, who is a known witch. In a footnote, Scott remarks that this was the name given to the grandmother witch, the very Hekate of Scottish popular superstition. Her name was bestowed in one or two instances upon sorceresses who were held to resemble her by their superior skill in hell's black grammar. White geese are sacred and symbolic of NicNeven, who is said to be able to fly by night invisibly with the cackling of geese said to herald her impending arrival. She is written as being the Queen of Elfame, which is Elfin, Queen of the Fairies, spirits and strange creatures, also known as the Great Muckle Wallower, and Queen of the Unseelie Court of Alba. When it comes to fairy courts, unseelie means wretched or unhappy, and seelie is pleasant or happy. NicNeven was said to rule with a male consort by her side, although we never get to know of his name. In Scottish law, she often shows up as Hebetro or Jaya Carlin. So Jaya is a possible cognate of the Norse word Geri, G-E-R-Y, G-E-R-I even, and holds the meaning of greedy, or it is said it could be from the Norse Jaya, meaning ogress. Obviously, as I said before, she was often seen as an ogress. So Jaya Carlin basically breaks down to mean hobgoblin or like supernatural monster. Carlin is said to be a Scots and Northern English word meaning crone or witch, and this is then linked to the Norse word curling, which is said to hold the same meaning. Yet I have also seen the word documented as meaning like witch or evil person. So basically a witch, a hag, an ogress, possibly greedy, a supernatural monster, creature. There's many different words. They're all very linked, but yeah, it gets very complicated. Jaya Carling or Habitrot is NicNeven in her crone-like form, so a crone-like spirit, who is known for her magical powers of spinning, weaving, and cloth making. So it just gets so confusing with some of this lore. Like, you know, there's so many different things to it, but bear with me. So at New Year in Scotland, it was believed to be unlucky if you left a piece of knitting unfinished at the new year, lest the habitrot should steal it. So NicNeven appeared in folklore from the 16th century onwards. Her name, like I said earlier, was used by mothers to ensure their children demonstrated good behaviour. NicNeven first appeared in a 16th century poem by Alexandra Montgomery. She was described as follows. Then a ready company came, soon after close, NicNeven with her nymphs in number enough, with charms from Caithness and the canonry of Ross, whose knowledge consists in casting a ball of yarn, the king of fairy and his court with the elf queen, with many elvish incubi, was riding that night. So within this, we can assume that the nymphs he writes of were likely to be a general term for female fairies or maidens. She has charms or spells read from Caithness and Ross, which are both counties in the far north of Scotland. So this gives us like a geographic point for her. And her knowledge or skill consists in casting balls of yarn or thread, which we could surmise is a method of like divination or enchantment. And then this ties into the Jaya carling reference, who, as we know, is obviously strongly connected to spinning. Again, the reference to the unnamed fairy king or man that she rides alongside. The elvish incubi, which means dangerous fairies. So NicNeven was said to ride out during storms and liminal times within the year. I also came across links to NicNeven and storms again, which got me excited. You know, I love the energy and power of a storm. If you are a weather witch, I'm sure that this might spark some interest in you. Sir Walter Scott wrote in 1831 that NicNeven was a gigantic and malignant female who rode on the storm and marshalled the rambling host of wanderers under her grim banner. This hag was called NicNeven in that later system which blended the faith of the Celts and the Goths on this subject. The great Scottish poet Dunbar has made a spirited description of this Hekate riding at the head of witches and good neighbours, fairies, namely sorceresses and elves, indifferently upon the ghostly even of Hallowmass. When Scotland converted to Christianity, NicNeven was removed from her pedestal as a goddess and reclassified as a demon or fairy. NicNeven seems to be most associated with the area of Fife, the Orkneys, where she is regarded as Queen of the Fairies and is amongst other spirits who are said to be part of the Wild Hunt. As the elder NicNeven, Habitrot or Jaya Carling, NicNeven was said to ride at night with a haunting supernatural entourage mounted upon ghostly horses. In the Orkney Isles, she was thought to live in the ancient Neolithic mounds, as did the fair folk. There is also a folklore belief that one of her sacred sites is Tomnahuric Hill on the outskirts of Inverness. NicNeven is said to govern the realms of magic and witchcraft and represents the imminent onset of winter. The Druid tradition at Samhain was to use this Sabbath as an opportunity to heal any disagreements that may have arisen with others. You may wish to call upon NicNeven to ask for her assistance in rectifying any disagreements that may have come up with you and anyone in your life. So you might opt to write on a piece of paper the reason for the disagreement or the anger that you hold towards someone else and burn it within your cauldron, a bonfire, or a heat-proof bowl. You could ask NicNeven to assist and bring power to your spell and destroy the negativity that has been formed within this relationship. NicNeven is honoured on her sacred night of Samhain when she is said to grant wishes and answer petitions. She is traditionally honoured with celebratory feasts and toasts to her. On this night, she is said to fly but allows herself to be visible. She is accompanied by a gaggle of witches and honking geese. But also, we're also told that she's accompanied by the Fae and her Fae husband, so do with this information as you will. In 1752, there was a calendar shift which moved dates by 11 days. So in essence, the old date of Samhain was November 11th, and this day is still known for honouring her too. So November 11th is often referred to as NicNeven's night, and some believe she rides out with her company, be it the Fae, be it her fairy husband, be it the witches, the geese are there. Anyway, she's said to ride out with them between October 31st and November 11th. It is said that perhaps NicNeven was a real witch. There are 3 witches in history who hold similar names to NicNeven that were accused of witchcraft. There's Kate McNevin, who lived in the Mondsey area and was executed in 1615. In 1569, it was documented in a book called The History and Life of King James VI. That's at St Andrews, a notable sorceress called Nick Neville was executed. So 74 years later, following their death, a man named John Bruges was put on trial for witchcraft, and he confessed of learning all his work from a widow named Noance Vic Cleric, who was said to be the sister of Nick Nelving, who was then noted as being that notorious and infamous witch in Mondsey. Oh, my brain. But connect the dots. So none of this information gives us any absolutes, and personally, I like to view NicNeven as more of a deity type figure than a real life witch. So the name NicNeven was said to take on a colloquial term for witches, and as time went on, these witches began to mould into one archetype, so like the grandmother witch. So the word NicNeven, in essence, became a word to describe a more senior witch, perhaps with better rank and power. Throughout the 16th and 17th century, Scotland was gripped by witchcraft hysteria. Isabel Gowdy, a farmer's wife, lived an unassuming life in the Highland village of Aldean. One day she was accused of dabbling in the occult, which was common at this time for many women. And this is one reason why, and I don't know how this is going to go down, but I really dislike talking about the witchcraft trials because it saddens me, obviously, and I feel like it was never about witches. It was about women. And that's why I just can't bring myself to talk about it. I just think it's just so triggering, heartbreaking. We need to honour those women and men. There were men killed in those times as well. But I feel like it was never about witches. It was just an absolute abuse of power and of women. And that's kind of all I'm really going to say on it for now. I'm sure we will come back to it. But anyway, enough of my opinions. So women were often accused of being in league with the devil over the most minor things, often false accusations, as we all know. And the witchfinders were making plenty of money from, this work. Women with any form of status, women for any reason were just thrown under the bus. It's just a hideous, hideous thing that happened in the course of time. But anyway, so back to Gowdy. She provided an in-depth confession freely without being tortured, explaining the exploits of herself and her coven and how they were bestowed supernatural powers from the Queen of the Fairies, NicNeven. Gowdy explained how they shapeshifted into animals, chanted spells to summon tempests, and flew to their Sabbaths on brooms of rushes and cornstalks. She talked about using puppets to cast hexes on children and exhuming corpses in a bid to make harvests fail. It said she was either mad or offered this information up willingly in a bid for leniency. There are no records of her execution. However, it is wondered if otherworldly forces were at play, enabling Gaudi to vanish without a trace and pass into legend forevermore. So I have a very old traditional ritual here to invoke NicNeven. It is said that if you spend a night on one of her crossroads, hills, or by the sea, where land, sea, and sky are all represented, she will grant the specific magical powers you require. You must bring offerings, arrive at dusk, invoke, and wait for her presence. If she doesn't appear on the first night, keep returning to carry out the same for up to 9 nights. If by the 9th night NicNeven hasn't arrived, it is said that perhaps she isn't the right deity for you. But should she arrive or send a spirit in her place, state out loud exactly what you wish for and leave your offerings right away. Leave calmly and peacefully, for it is said if you run in fear, you will forfeit that which you have asked for. And of course, you could actually use the Witch's Reel or the Conjuration of NicNeven from Roger J. Horn's book that I provided at the beginning of the show for this ritual. In terms of offerings, it is said that as a Scottish deity, her preference for offerings are whiskey, cider, mead, or a good ale, either homemade or store-bought, as long as it's of good quality. So none of the cheap stuff for NicNeven. I just want to say thank you so much for all the support coming back for season 2. It's really good to be back. I was a little bit nervous, but overwhelming amount of lovely messages, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I'm just so stunned at how many people have been listening this week. I think there's a lot more people that have found the show, and I'm really, really grateful. On that note, if you are able to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, I'll be really grateful. It does mean that the show gets recommended more people can find it. So if you are able to, I'd be ever so grateful. So aside from that, I just want to say have a great week, witches. I will be back soon. Lots and lots of witchy love.